I guess some jokes write themselves. The latest story, Ponies of Dark Water, is a first for the main series comics. We've seen 4-parters, 2-parters, and the occasional one-shot, but with this we're getting our first 3-part story arc. After being exposed to the water from a mysterious spring, the main 6 begin to change into corrupted versions of themselves, and it's up to Spike, the CMC, Zecora, and Princess Luna to set things right before they corrupt the rest of Ponyville. Please don't be terrible. Please don't be terrible. So what's good? I was really worried about this one. The story arc was done by Tom Zoller and Tony Fleeks, who previously worked together on Night of the Living Apples, and we all know how much I loved that story. But thankfully this arc is much better. Firstly, I'm glad that the Dark Six weren't just opposites of the elements of harmony like their discorded versions. Not only would that have been incredibly lazy and an oversimplification of these characters, but it would also be really dated since the elements were retired over 2 years ago and are pretty much irrelevant at this point. Instead, the Dark Water takes a key quality about whoever it's exposed to and twists it into a malicious version of itself. Twilight's passion for knowledge becomes an obsession to become the smartest in the world. Applejack's love for her family business turns her into an extortionist business mare. Fluttershy's care for her animals turns her into a ruthless forest queen. These versions are much more creative than just making them opposites of their core archetypes, and it makes for more interesting portrayals. Well, for the most part. It also lets the story escalate gradually, as the stakes get higher with more dark ponies being introduced. As for the dialogue, Zoller has definitely improved since Night of the Living Apples, and the characters get some good lines, especially in the fight between Rarity and Luna, where Rarity says that Luna is out of style and she responds with, "I'm a classic." The writing of the final scene was another highlight, as it wraps things up nicely but also leaves you with something to linger on. Luna says that it was a good thing that the Dark Water also disrupted the main 6's friendship, because if they had worked together, there would have been no chance at beating them. And the main 6 are left to think about that. Normally the whole friendship thing tends to get ham-fisted, even for a series that has friendship is magic in the title. But here, it was just one line that's used in a way to leave some food for thought rather than hammer in a lesson. I'm also glad that the Dark Six's introductions were spread throughout the entire arc instead of trying to focus on all of them as soon as possible. It kept parts 1 and 3 from feeling too crowded. Part 2, not so much. Which brings us to what's not so good. While it was a good call to spread out the introductions of the Dark Six, it was a little uneven. Part 1 had more focus on Applejack, Part 2 focused on Rarity, Fluttershy, and Pinkie, and Part 3 mainly features Twilight and Rainbow Dash. With Part 2 having the most dark ponies in the spotlight, it ends up being kind of all over the place. With this arc being a 3-parter, there was the opportunity to avoid the usual trap that the 4-parters fall into, where there's one issue, usually parts 2 or 3, where nothing really happens, but instead we get the opposite effect, a part where too much is happening. And with there being 6 ponies and 3 issues, this was an easy trap to avoid. With all the things going on in part 2, it becomes a lot to take in, and it ends up being a clusterfuck. What? My channel's monetized through Patreon, not YouTube. Lastly, there's one element of this story that I feel very mixed about. Princess Luna. Whenever she's included in a story, I get excited, but also worried. It seems that lately, whenever Luna has a major role in a story, whether it's an episode or a comic, they have to bring up her past as Nightmare Moon in some way, shape, or form. While it is true that her past is an essential part of her character, that doesn't mean it's the only part, and she doesn't have to be written like it is. At best, it's redundant, and at worst, it's regressing. On the other hand, like Friends Forever 20, bringing up Luna's past does work here, and unlike other stories, she doesn't lament over what she's done, but instead she uses the knowledge and experience she's gained to help the situation. She steps up to the plate and gets stuff done. When the Dark Water turns her back into Nightmare Moon, it was a good way to raise the stakes at the end of part 2. She still inadvertently helps take out the Dark Six, and when she was cured, she was able to fool Rarity into drinking the antidote. So as far as this story is concerned, utilizing Luna's past worked out, but it would have been great if it wasn't done so often before. Because Luna's past has been brought up so many times in previous stories where it either wasn't necessary or terribly handled, it lessens the impact of stories where it's actually done well. Still, Ponies of Dark Water was a surprisingly good arc, and a major improvement over Zoller and Fleek's last outing. Part 2 was a bit messy, but the story as a whole had some creative twists, good character moments, and interesting dark interpretations of the main 6. And above all else, it gives Zecora something to do. The next arc will be a two-parter where Mayor tries to get re-elected and faces off against Filthy Rich in a bid for mayor. Please don't be Ponyville Days Part 2. So what did you think of Ponies of Dark Water? Swarm that comment section below or bug me on social media, and consider supporting me through Patreon or PayPal art commissions. Until next time, keep it sketchy, folks.